Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in Sophomore English. We continue in our study of poetry collection number 6. We're going to be working with Dahlia Ravikovitch's Pride on page 727. Before we get there though, on 725, let's just pay attention to a bit of biographic information. Notice your dates, 1936 to 2005. She's an Israeli poet born in a town near Tel Aviv and raised on a kibbutz cooperative settlement. Her father's death in an accident when she was 6 was a powerful influence. Her intensely personal poems, I would write that down, personal poems are charged with images from nature, history, and religion. We're going to see in the text Pride a compelling question, and that is simply this: what does it mean to have weaknesses? Let's pay attention now to the poem. We'll read, we'll enjoy, and then we'll annotate. All right? Let's go to work with it.
Pride by Dahlia Ravikovitch, translated by Hannah Bloch and Ariel Bloch. I tell you, even rocks crack, and not because of age. For years they lie on their backs in the heat and the cold. So many years, it almost seems peaceful. They don't move, so the cracks stay hidden. A kind of pride. Years pass over them, waiting. Whoever is going to shatter them hasn't come yet. And so the moss flourishes, the seaweed whips around, the sea pushes through and rolls back, the rocks seem motionless, till a little seal comes to rub against them, comes and goes away. And suddenly, the rock has an open wound. I told you, when rocks break, it happens by surprise. And people, too.
Now, this is a very interesting poem, and I'm going to actually have you jump to 3a. I'm forecasting now some of the work that we're about to do here in a little bit. We're going to be working with Shakespeare's classic tragedy, Julius Caesar. And while the play is actually named Julius Caesar, the true tragedy of that play, already I'm going to say it out loud, is the lead actor Brutus. And there, in that person, in Brutus, we have a very fascinating case study of what it is that we're talking about here. What is this poem about at level 1? Let's work now just summarizing. It is about the ways rocks crack. Rocks can lay there for a while and not be disturbed, and then all of a sudden an event happens. In this case, a seal rubs against the rock, and the rock then cracks. So you read the entire poem, and it's basically about how rocks crack. But there's 2 things that make this poem fascinating. One, its title. Notice it's not called Rocks, it's called Pride. And then the very final line of the poem, people too crack, right? As in people too. So we want to now pay attention to the ways in which this is a poem that raises a very disturbing question. People can appear one way for some time, and then all of a sudden, through a series of life events, cracking, shattering, can happen. Now watch how she sets this up. She says, I tell you. It's almost like she's having a debate or an argument. Where maybe, for example, she said to somebody, you know what, there's certain people you just can't trust. And the person came back and said, what are you talking about? Of course you can trust them. And she comes back and says, no, I tell you, even rocks crack. Of course, this notion of the rock as being the symbol of solidity, fortitude, courage, self-assurance, we might say. And not because of age either. In other words, the cracking may happen over a certain period of time, but it may not be a long period of time. For years, rocks, lie on their backs in the heat and the cold, and so many years it almost seems peaceful. They don't move, so the cracks stay hidden. And then, of course, at line 8, a kind of pride. Now, this will, of course, be the coming together with the title. What is exactly we're saying about people and pride? Well, there's a famous biblical phrase that says pride goes before the fall. And the idea is that you can be a little bit too overconfident. Pride here, by the way, seems to be not the positive kind of pride where you take confidence in yourself, but rather the kind of pride that's more like a self-assurance that is not grounded in reality or the hope of someone else to hold up or stand up under pressure, and then that someone or someone else folds, right? Years pass over them waiting. Whoever is going to shatter them hasn't come yet. This notion that we're always defined. Let's put this at 2a. It's one of the major messages of this poem. You are fundamentally defined by the challenges of your life. And whether you crack or whether you stand strong. The poem suggests it's not always easy to predict that. And to that degree, this is a somewhat controversial poem. We think there are people we can trust. When we come back to our study of Julius Caesar at 3a, we'll point out Julius Caesar totally trusted his best pal, Brutus, only to discover at the last second that in fact it was Brutus who will drive in the last spear knife point into his best friend. Whoever is going to shatter them hasn't come yet, and so the moss flourishes, the seaweed whips around, the sea pushes through and rolls back, the rocks seem motionless till a little seal, that is to say a small problem, or it could be an individual, comes to rub against them, comes and goes away, and suddenly the rock has an open wound. I told you. Back to the opening line. I tell you. I told you. When rocks break, it happens by surprise. And people, too. Now, there's been a lot of debate about how to read this poem. Because one way of reading this poem is, it is a cautionary tale. You better be careful putting your trust in people. Because they can seem to be a rock for a long time, and then all of a sudden something happens and they crack, and then an open wound. Of course, the power of that open wound as a powerful metaphor is that, all of a sudden people can act in certain ways, and you thought you could trust them, and then you couldn't trust them, and then it's somewhat disturbing. Let's go to 2a quickly. Messages here. Well, one is that we have to be careful of pride. No doubt. Beware of pride. Jump to 3a really quickly. When you're a senior, we're going to do a text called Beowulf, and we'll hear that instruction from that famous Anglo-Saxon epic poem. Beware of pride. Beware of the ways in which you think that you're strong when in fact you're maybe a little overconfident, too overconfident. Or, maybe another major message here is, be careful, don't put too much trust in other people, because you never know when they could crack. Which is a somewhat skeptical message, no doubt, about this poem, which is what makes this poem a somewhat controversial poem. No doubt it to be. We're messing around with powerful word pictures here, symbolism. Notice the figurative language of the metaphor, of the notion of a rock that we think is solid, but then it potentially can crack. At 3a, what is the text for you? Do you have a song on your playlist that speaks about the dangers of pride, or talks about the cautions against trusting people too easily because they may let you down, or you may let others down? The degree to which, let's jump to 3b. In your life, what's a time, this is a tough question. What's a time when you trusted in someone and that someone cracked? You totally believed in that individual, and that individual cracked. What's the time that happened? Of course, the more disturbing question is even maybe this one. What's the last time somebody trusted in you and you cracked? You didn't stand up, but rather you were challenged to take care of that person, and you didn't do it. You failed. You let that individual down. That is to say, you were not the stand-up person. And how much of that had to do with pride? Jump back to 3a really quickly. You'll maybe remember in our freshman year we talked about Aristotle's Poetics and the idea that hubris is such an important part of the downfall of the protagonist. That is to say, the pride that will ultimately lead to problems. At 3a as well, write down the other text that we're going to study together as sophomores, Sophocles' great classic Antigone, where in that play we're going to see Creon, the king, who will have a certain amount of excessive pride that will lead to his downfall. Well, there you go, a challenging text that maybe challenges us to be a little bit more rock steady, yeah? Thank you.